Hey everyone, welcome to my next video. So one thing we hear in the community all the time is that the dragons are coming, that we'll see Jon, Dany, and Tyrion swoop in on the dragons and save the day, that the dragons are the only way to beat the White Walkers, and that the ending has been obvious since the end of Season 1. But I don't think it'll happen quite like that, and I hope it doesn't. So let's get everyone on the same page for a moment, and I'll explain why I think that. I want us to picture this for a moment. It's been 7 or 8 books, 7-8 years or seasons of the show, and the moment we want to see is finally here. It's the White Walkers versus Dany's dragons. It's the namesake of the book, it's the Song of Ice and Fire, and it's finally come to fruition with this clash. Our heroes are desperate. The White Walkers have come to the wall. It's crumbled or useless. The Night's Watch is gone, and the White Walker army is moving south, and it's getting massive as they feed on all the dead of the War of the Five Kings and the conflicts in the north. On the opposing side, all the peoples we've seen matched up so far are here. The Northmen, Wildlings, Red Priest, Dothraki, Unsullied, Ironborn, the Brotherhood Without Banners, and more. And they're here for a titanic battle. They've been brought together by the prince or princess that was promised, and they're ready to fight this new war for the dawn. They've got to find a way of killing the White Walkers among their thousands and thousands of whites and win this thing. So they all march to the battlefield, they get a rousing speech, and then they sit down and watch Dany and her dragons do all the work as they realize it's not a big deal and they didn't even need to be here because clearly Dany and the other riders have got this and they fly in and toast the White Walkers in less than a few minutes. Does that sound lame? I hope so, because it is kind of lame. And I'm being deliberately silly. I can't speak for everyone, of course, but for me, I won't be that happy if I find out I've been waiting years to see this battle and it's all over without the armies of Westeros and Essos even mattering. That the White Walkers aren't that much of a threat when the dragons can just burn all the whites away. No need for dragonglass, a couple Valyrian steel swords will do it. No need for Bran. Why bother to show me all these people coming together if they get to chill while the dragons do all the work? No, for me I hope to see a big battle, and I hope to see an interesting one, where the dragons are nullified in some way or they're otherwise kept occupied, and it'll show that the White Walkers have to be defeated at least semi-conventionally. And really we know that we can defeat the White Walkers without the dragons, and we've seen at least 2 armies that have a shot at this. Now before I go further, there's not a lot of information to go on in hints, but I'm going to take a look at some basic stuff to explain why I think this, and to show how it can work out. So first, why do I say the Walkers can be defeated without the dragons? Well, because they were in the past. Now, of course, man had help from the Children of the Forest, and the children will not be back this time to help. But the point is, they didn't have the dragons and they won the first war. So why do we need them now? Especially when things have changed so much since A Long Night. Westeros is far more organized, they have major castles like Winterfell, steel weapons, things like that, just to name a few. And these are things that didn't exist before and should be able to help in one way or another against either the Walkers or the Whites. Westeros should be able to launch a much more capable defense this time around and meet the Walkers on more even terms than it was when it was hundreds of smaller kingdoms. Our first real clue is that the White Walkers may be immune to fire, and they probably are. They certainly don't seem to care about it being there as they walk straight through it, putting it out wherever they go. And it seems to be just how cold they are, or rather some type of spell or magic that they give off. We've seen this once with normal fire at Hardhome, and again at the cave with magical fire. I'm not sure if that's a bit of a stretch to say, but the children did create that fire with one of their grenades, so it's not natural, and maybe the same situation applies with dragonfire or wildfire. Now we won't know until we see that, but more importantly than the Walkers being immune, we know the Whites are not immune to fire. But the important thing to point out about the last time we saw 3 dragons in a big battle, the Field of Fire, is that it got its namesake from the dragons lighting fires around the enemy army in addition to burning them, basically setting the fields on fire. Now they can still burn the Whites themselves, but snow doesn't burn of course, so that is a problem because it means that the dragons will need to come in close to strafe or burn the Whites. Now this is a problem because the dragons may not be as effective. They didn't want to get close to the Field of Fire because of enemy archers, and we know that one of Aegon's sisters took an arrow into her shoulder during the battle. And dragons of course are not invincible, they're certainly more sturdy than their riders, but you can still bring them down. And that brings us to the Whites themselves. We often see the Whites with weapons. They seem to be mindless, but we know that they can do a little bit more. We did see that attempted assassination in Season 1. And we see them with axes and swords all the time, but no bows. So will we see some ranged weapons? In addition, for this battle to have any sense of drama, we really do, because there has to be some type of threat to the dragons. Archers or even some undead giants with those bows would make for some really tense flyovers for the dragons. It's not unreasonable as the White Walkers come south and we see the true scope of their army that they do have some of those giants there potentially present. And a quick note for everyone calling me out on this, the giants are down to several hundred in the books, and even Jon says,
And he has more giants, he has more mammoths.
So we know there are more out there in both the show and books, we just haven't seen them yet. Now, if it turns out there are no ranged weapons in the White Walker army, there are still some other ways they could pose a threat to the dragons. So let's switch gears for a moment and talk about the dragons. First, we know they're not immortal, just like I've been saying. Although they do live longer than humans, they can be killed. And we do have artwork in the World of Ice and Fire of a dragon wearing armor, and we know one dragon was killed in Dorne during the conquest by a scorpion bolt to the eye. We know there are more scorpions on top of the wall, so maybe the White Walkers will steal those or something. We also see Drogon take a spear to the back when he tries to save Dany in the pit, so maybe he's just not mature, or maybe these are not the same heavily armored dragons we're used to like in other fantasies like The Hobbit. However, even if the White Walkers don't have any ranged weapons, they can still pose a threat by using a storm. Now, this is an interesting question for me, because I'm not 100% sure if it's the storm that killed people at Hardhome, or if it concealed wights within it who did the work. And it's probably a death cloud since it happened so rapidly, but any type of storm is a problem, really. If it's a death cloud, that's a massive problem for obvious reasons. If not, well, it's still a problem because close air support can't operate when there's no visibility and when it's grounded and can't fly. Now, we know dragons have gone north before with the Targaryen kings, so it's tough to say how much of a storm would affect them and whether or not they'd be grounded by it. I mean, if it was me, I would not take my dragon out in a blizzard because who wants to do that? But we know one of the Night's Watch castles was renamed to Queen's Gate for that visit, and we also know that the Night's Watch was given extra land because the Queen was impressed with them. So she was probably there for a little while, and it's safe to say that the dragons are okay in a cold environment, but whether or not they can function in a blizzard is the real question. Does it weaken them? Can they even fly in a blizzard and be fine? Never mind the dragons, what about the riders? Are they going to have a hard time holding on? Is it going to be too cold for them? If it is a death cloud, will the dragons be too busy trying to keep that at bay with their fire? So if the dragons don't participate or are otherwise kept occupied during this fight for one reason or another, how do you beat the White Walkers? Well, earlier I said that we were seeing two armies that could do it, and those two armies are the Dothraki and the Unsullied. Now, if you guys out there are anything like me, then you've always wondered what purpose the Dothraki are supposed to fill, especially since they can feel kind of random sometimes. But this is a perfect potential example. Whites stand no chance when they're unable to catch their prey. A horse archer is the perfect counter, kind of like a medieval shotgun. I'm going to use this short clip from Total War Warhammer to help me demonstrate, but basically as soon as they get close to you, you simply turn around and run away. Place some braziers with flaming arrows out of reach, and you can go back and forth and fire these arrows all day until the whites are no problem at all. Now, of course, it could be hard for the horses to operate in snow and mud, especially with the Dothraki having little to no experience in snow, but I've always wondered if ghost grass is actually snow, as it's described as being pale as milk, can grow taller than a man on horseback, and murders all other grass. It's described as having a stalk, so it's probably not snow. Anyway, back on topic. I am hoping that this battle will take place much farther south. King's Landing, I think, is the farthest that snow goes in the books usually, so hopefully we won't see it and that won't even be a problem. But if it is, the Dothraki can always stand still, because next up, if you don't want to use this cheese strat on the White Walkers and you have to fight them head on, then how do you do it? How do you defeat an enemy that can raise your own fallen soldiers to fight against you while you're fighting them? An enemy that can terrify even the hardest of soldiers, or the wildlings who are kind of used to it from the stories and the experiences that they've had. What group of southern knights is going to hold up to undead giants and undead bears? And how are you going to prevent your army from losing all hope? Well, in that case, it's easy. You're going to need to take on a force that has no fear and feels no pain, and you're going to need the Unsullied for this. You need that legendary discipline to fight the dead. The Unsullied are really very straightforward. If it comes down to a slugfest with the White Walkers, the Unsullied are the only force that's going to be able to grind it out without running away. Couple them up with the Dothraki, and you won't even need the dragons to win. You can already see the makings of the force that's going to defeat the White Walkers. Alright, thank you for watching. I hope everyone enjoyed the video. Keep in mind I didn't talk too much about strategy or what might happen during the actual battle because I'm going to save that for a future video. But Did you watch that? I hope it made you think, and that's kind of my goal with this channel, to create interesting content. Feel free to like and subscribe for more. Leave a comment if you want to discuss things with me. I'm always welcome to that. And I'll be around. I'll see you guys soon with the next video.